Please, mister, we'll do anything. Just don't let us freeze." The desperate words cut through the howling Wyoming wind like a knife through silence. Jake Thornton looked down at the two snow-covered figures huddled against his barn door, their blue lips trembling with more than just cold. Two children, couldn't be more than 7 years old, clinging to each other like their lives depended on it. Before we embark on this incredible journey together, I have a small heartfelt favor to ask. Please subscribe to my channel. Give this video a thumbs up. It costs you nothing but means the world to me. And let me know in the comments which beautiful corner of the world you're watching from. Your support truly makes all the difference. Because they did. The blizzard had been raging for 3 days, and Jake had seen enough frozen corpses in his time to know death when it came knocking. These twins were maybe an hour away from becoming 2 more casualties of the harsh mountain winter. Their threadbare clothes hung in tatters, and the girl's bare feet were already turning that terrible shade of white that meant frostbite. "Where's your folks?" Jake's voice came out rougher than he intended, years of solitude making him forget how to speak gently. The boy, slightly taller than his sister, straightened with a pride that broke Jake's heart. "Dead, sir. Wagon got stuck in the pass. Ma made us run before the wolves came." Jake's weathered hands clenched into fists. He knew those passes, knew the wolves, knew what happened to travelers caught unprepared in weather like this. Looking into their eyes, identical amber pools filled with terror and hope, Jake Thornton made a decision that would change everything. He'd sworn never to open his heart again after losing his own family to disease 5 years ago, had built his life around avoiding exactly this kind of responsibility. But some promises weren't meant to be kept. The decision to save 2 freezing children should have been simple, but nothing in Jake Thornton's life had been simple for 5 years. Inside. Now. He stepped back, allowing the twins to stumble into his warm cabin. The girl collapsed immediately, her strength finally giving out. The boy caught her, his small arms barely able to support her weight. Jake's hands moved with practiced efficiency, the same hands that had once cradled his own daughter during her final fever. He wrapped both children in thick wool blankets, their bodies so cold the fabric seemed to hiss against their skin. "What are your names?" he asked, stoking the fire until it roared with life-giving heat. "I'm Tommy," the boy whispered. "This is Lily. We're twins." Jake nodded, studying their faces in the firelight. Same auburn hair, same amber eyes, same stubborn set to their jaws despite their exhaustion. They couldn't be more than 7, maybe 8 years old. "How long since you ate?" Tommy's stomach answered before he could, growling loud enough to be heard over the wind. 3 days, maybe 4. Ma gave us the last of the bread before." His voice trailed off. Jake moved to his small kitchen, heating milk and cutting thick slices of bread. Simple food, but enough to keep body and soul together. As he worked, he found himself remembering other small hands reaching for food, another voice calling Papa in the darkness. "Here." He placed the meal before them, watching as they ate with the desperate hunger of children who'd known real starvation. Lily's color was already returning, her breathing less labored. "You warm enough now?" Jake asked. Lily nodded, her eyes heavy with approaching sleep. "Are you going to send us away tomorrow?" The question hit Jake like a physical blow, because he'd been asking himself the same thing. The smart choice would be to take them to town, find someone else to care for them. He had no business raising children, no experience with twins, no patience for the chaos they'd bring to his ordered life. But looking at their faces, seeing the hope they tried so hard to hide, Jake found himself trapped by something stronger than logic. Something that felt dangerously like love. The morning brought clarity in the form of 18 inches of fresh snow and a silence so complete it felt like the world had ended. Jake woke to find both twins huddled against him on the narrow bed, seeking warmth and comfort in sleep. Lily had her thumb in her mouth, while Tommy's arm was thrown protectively over his sister. They looked impossibly small and vulnerable in the gray dawn light. Moving carefully to avoid waking them, Jake built up the fire and started coffee. Outside, the storm had finally blown itself out, leaving behind a landscape so white and pristine it hurt to look at, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. "Mister?" Lily's voice was small and uncertain. Jake turned to find her sitting up, auburn curls sticking in every direction. "Morning. You feeling better?" She nodded solemnly. "Are we in trouble? Ma always said not to bother strangers." "You're not in trouble." Jake poured himself coffee, studying the girl's serious face. "What's your last name?" "Carson. Tommy Carson and Lily Carson. We're twins." Jake nearly dropped his cup. Carson. The name hit him like a sledgehammer to the chest, bringing back memories he'd spent 5 years trying to forget. The last letter from his brother Michael, postmarked from Oregon. The mention of a wife named Sarah and twin babies on the way. "Your pa," Jake said carefully. "What was his name?" "Michael Carson," Tommy answered, now awake and watching Jake with sharp eyes. "He was a soldier before." "Why?" The coffee cup slipped from Jake's numb fingers, shattering against the floor in a crash that seemed to echo forever. These weren't just any orphaned children. They were his brother's kids. His own blood, left alone to die in the wilderness while he'd been living in isolation, nursing old wounds and newer regrets. "Tommy. Lily." His voice came out strangely thick. "Did your pa ever mention having a brother named Jake?" Understanding dawned in Tommy's eyes first. "Uncle Jake? Papa said you lived in Wyoming, but we thought... He said you were probably dead." "Not dead." Jake knelt beside the bed, studying their faces with new recognition. Now he could see it. Michael's stubborn chin, Sarah's gentle eyes, the family resemblance that should have been obvious from the start. Just lost. Lily scrambled forward, small hands reaching for his face. "Are you really our uncle? Our real uncle?" "I am." The words came easier than he'd expected. "And you're safe now. Both of you." Tommy's face crumpled with relief so profound it was painful to witness. "We don't have to go to the orphanage?" "No orphanage," Jake promised, meaning it with every fiber of his being. "Your family." But even as he held them, Jake's mind was racing with the impossible logistics of his new reality. He knew nothing about raising children, had no woman to help, no neighbors within 20 miles. Winter had just begun, and supplies were already running low. The smart thing would still be to take them to town, find a proper family with experience and resources. The right thing was something else entirely. 3 days later, Jake realized that knowing they were family and knowing how to care for them were entirely different challenges. "I don't want to wear a dress," Lily announced, crossing her arms in a gesture so reminiscent of Michael that Jake's throat tightened. "Dresses are stupid." Jake stared at the pile of women's clothing he'd found in his trunk, belongings from his wife and daughter that he'd never been able to discard. They were the only suitable clothes he had for Lily, but apparently she had other ideas. "All girls wear dresses," he said weakly. "Not all girls. Tommy and me always dressed the same. Ma said it was easier." Lily's amber eyes flashed with determination. "I want to wear what Tommy wears." Tommy, meanwhile, was drowning in one of Jake's old shirts, the fabric hanging nearly to his knees. Both children needed proper clothes, but the nearest general store was a day's ride through snow that hadn't shown any signs of melting. "Fine," Jake said, accepting defeat. "We'll make it work." The sewing proved to be another humbling experience. Jake's large hands, so skilled with rope and leather, fumbled helplessly with needle and thread. After an hour of frustrated attempts, he had managed to create something that resembled clothing if you squinted and used your imagination. "It's perfect," Lily declared, holding up the lopsided shirt that would have fit a child twice her size. "Thank you, Uncle Jake." The simple gratitude in her voice made Jake's chest tight. These children had lost everything: parents, home, security. Yet they still found ways to smile, still trusted him to care for them, despite his obvious incompetence. "We need supplies," he admitted. "Food, proper clothes, medicine. But the trip to town—" "We can come with you," Tommy offered. "We're good riders." Jake looked at their eager faces and felt his heart sink. The trail to Willow Creek was treacherous in good weather, potentially deadly in winter. But leaving them alone wasn't an option either. "It's too dangerous." "More dangerous than freezing to death?" Lily asked with unsettling logic. That night, as the twins slept curled together like puppies, Jake sat by the fire and tried to plan. Every solution seemed to lead to more problems. He had enough food for maybe 2 more weeks if they were careful. Enough firewood for a month if the weather stayed mild. But winter in Wyoming was never mild for long. The children needed things he couldn't provide: medical care, education, the companionship of other children, a woman's influence and guidance. All the things he'd failed to give his own daughter before she died. But looking at their peaceful faces in the firelight, Jake felt his resolve hardening into something unbreakable. He'd failed his brother by losing touch, failed his own family by being unable to save them. He wouldn't fail Tommy and Lily. The decision to ride to Willow Creek came when Tommy developed a cough that reminded Jake too much of the illness that had taken his daughter. "It's just a little cold," the boy insisted, but Jake could hear the wheeze in his breathing, see the way his small body shook with each spasm. They needed medicine, and they needed it now. Bundling both children in every spare blanket he owned, Jake prepared for the most terrifying ride of his life. Leading his mare through snow that reached her belly, while keeping 2 children safe and warm on her back, felt like attempting the impossible. "Tell me about Papa," Lily requested as they made their slow progress down the mountain. She was tucked securely behind Jake, her arms wrapped around his waist, while Tommy rode behind her. Jake's throat tightened. He and Michael had been close once, before the war changed everything. Before pride and stubbornness drove them apart with words that could never be taken back. "Your father was brave," he began carefully. "Bravest man I ever knew. When we were boys, he once climbed a tree to save a kitten during a thunderstorm." "Did he save it?" Tommy asked between coughs. "He did. Got struck by lightning for his trouble, but the kitten was fine." Jake smiled at the memory. That was Michael, always willing to risk everything for someone who needed help. "Like you did for us," Lily observed with startling insight. The words hit Jake harder than he'd expected. Was that what he was doing? Following in his brother's footsteps, finally understanding what Michael had tried to tell him in that last, unread letter? Willow Creek appeared through the snow like a mirage, its handful of buildings offering the promise of warmth and supplies. But as they approached the town's single main street, Jake noticed something troubling. Curtains twitched in windows, and the few people visible hurried inside when they spotted the approaching riders. "Why are they hiding?" Lily whispered. Jake's hand moved instinctively to the gun at his hip. Something was wrong. Willow Creek was usually friendly to travelers, especially in winter when everyone understood the dangers of the trail. At the general store, the truth became clear. Posted on the door was a hand-lettered sign: "Wanted. 2 children, twins, escaped from Riverside Orphanage. Reward offered. Contact Sheriff Morrison. Jake's blood turned to ice. Underneath the text were crude but recognizable sketches of Tommy and Lily. Uncle Jake? Tommy had spotted the sign too, his face pale with fear. Are they going to take us away? Before Jake could answer, the store door opened, and a thin man in a sheriff's badge stepped out, his hand resting on his gun. Well, well, Sheriff Morrison said with a cold smile. Looks like someone's just earned themselves a nice reward. The sheriff's smile never reached his eyes as he studied Jake and the twins, his hand still resting on his weapon with practiced ease. Those children belong in a proper institution, Morrison declared, not with some mountain hermit who probably stole them in the first place. Jake's jaw tightened, every instinct screaming at him to protect Tommy and Lily. But he was outnumbered, outgunned, and carrying two children who couldn't run even if he tried to fight. They're my brother's kids, he said carefully. My family. Got papers to prove that? The sheriff's voice dripped skepticism. Because I've got legal documents right here saying they're wards of the state. Behind Jake, he could feel Tommy and Lily trembling with more than cold. Lily's small hands clutched at his coat, while Tommy's breathing grew more labored with each frightened wheeze. The boy needs medicine, Jake said. Look at him. Morrison glanced at Tommy with calculating eyes. All the more reason to get him to proper care. That orphanage has a real doctor. The orphanage chains children to beds, a new voice interrupted from the store's doorway. Forces them to work 16-hour days. Half the kids who go in never come out. Jake turned to see a woman emerging from the shadows, tall, auburn-haired, with a doctor's bag in her capable hands. Her green eyes blazed with anger as she faced down the sheriff. Dr. Catherine Walsh. She introduced herself to Jake with a crisp nod. And Sheriff Morrison knows damn well what happens at Riverside. The sheriff's face darkened. Your opinions weren't asked for, Doc. This is legal business. Medical emergency trumps your bounty hunting, Catherine replied coolly, moving toward Tommy. This child needs immediate treatment. She knelt beside Jake's horse, her skilled hands immediately assessing Tommy's condition. Her touch was gentle but professional as she listened to his breathing, checked his temperature. Pneumonia, she diagnosed grimly. Early stages but serious. He needs medication and rest, not a jolting trip to some hellhole orphanage. Now see here, Morrison began. No, you see here. Catherine's voice turned steel hard. I'm invoking medical authority. These children are in my care until the boy recovers. Jake watched this exchange with growing amazement. In the space of 5 minutes, this stranger had positioned herself between his family and danger, risking her own safety to protect children she'd never met. Doc's got no authority over legal matters, Morrison protested, but his confidence was wavering. Want to test that theory in front of Judge Matthews? Catherine asked sweetly. Because I'm sure he'd love to hear about your arrangement with the orphanage. What's your cut, Sheriff? 10%? 20? Morrison's face went white, then red. This ain't over, he snarled, but he was already backing away. As the sheriff retreated, Catherine turned to Jake with eyes that held both compassion and steel. You've got bigger problems than you know, she warned quietly, but we'll face them together. Catherine's clinic was a refuge that smelled of carbolic acid and hope, a clean, warm space above the barbershop where she'd carved out her practice despite the town's resistance to a female doctor. Morrison's been taking money from Riverside for years, she explained as she treated Tommy's congestion with steam and herbs. Every child he delivers nets him $50. He's not going to give up easily. Jake watched her work, marveling at the gentle competence in her hands. Tommy's breathing was already easier, his color improving under her care. Why help us? He asked. You don't know anything about me. Catherine paused in her ministrations, her green eyes meeting his. I know you rode through a blizzard to get that boy medical attention. I know you're willing to face down a corrupt sheriff to protect them. That's enough." Lily, meanwhile, had discovered Catherine's collection of medical books and was studying the anatomical drawings with fascination. "Are these real people's insides?" "Very real," Catherine confirmed with a smile. "Would you like to learn about them?" "Yes, please." As Catherine began explaining the respiratory system to an enthralled Lily, Jake found himself studying this remarkable woman who'd stepped into their lives like an answer to prayers he hadn't dared voice. "You said we have bigger problems," he reminded her. Catherine's expression sobered. "Riverside has connections all over the territory. They'll send men, probably within the week. Morrison's just the local muscle. Then we leave town, head back to the mountain. Running won't solve this." Catherine's voice was firm. "Those children need legal protection. They need someone to stand up and fight for them properly." Jake felt the familiar weight of inadequacy settling on his shoulders. "I'm just a rancher. I don't know anything about legal fights." "But I do." Catherine's eyes flashed with determination. "My father was a lawyer before he died. I know how the system works, know what documents we need to establish your guardianship." "We?" The word slipped out before Jake could stop it, carrying more hope than he'd intended. Catherine noticed, her cheeks coloring slightly. "I meant—" she began, then stopped. "Actually, I meant exactly what I said. These children need advocates, multiple advocates." Tommy looked up from the steam treatment, his young face serious. "Are you going to help Uncle Jake take care of us?" "If you'll let me," Catherine replied gently. "Yes, please," Lily said immediately. "You're smart, and Uncle Jake needs smart people to help him." Jake nearly choked on his coffee. "Thanks for the vote of confidence." "It's true," Lily continued matter-of-factly. "You're very good at keeping us warm and fed, but you're terrible at sewing, and you don't know anything about medicine." Catherine laughed, the sound bright and musical in the small clinic. "I like her. She's practical." As evening fell and Tommy's fever broke, Jake found himself facing a choice that felt as momentous as the decision to save 2 freezing children. He could take Catherine's help and risk involving her in the dangerous fight ahead. Or he could face Morrison and Riverside alone, knowing he was probably doomed to fail. The attack came at dawn, just as Catherine had predicted, but with more violence than any of them had anticipated. Jake woke to the sound of breaking glass and boots on stairs, his hand already reaching for his gun before his mind fully processed the danger. Through Catherine's clinic window, he could see armed men surrounding the building. "Back exit," Catherine whispered urgently, already moving to wake the twins. "I prepared for this." But as they reached the rear door, more men emerged from the alley, rifles gleaming in the early light. They were trapped, surrounded by professional bounty hunters who'd traveled far for their prize. "Jake Thornton," a voice called from the street. "Send out those children and nobody gets hurt." Jake's blood turned to ice as he recognized the speaker. Dutch Miller, a man he'd known during the war, a man without conscience or mercy, now working for Riverside's collection efforts. "How much are they paying you, Dutch?" Jake called back. "Enough to make this worth my while. But I remember you from Shiloh, Thornton. You were a good soldier. Don't die for 2 kids that ain't even yours." Tommy and Lily pressed close to Jake's sides, their small bodies trembling but their faces determined. Catherine checked her medical bag, pulling out a small derringer with practiced ease. "There's another way," she said quietly, "but it's dangerous." Before Jake could ask what she meant, Catherine did something that changed everything. She walked to the front window, clearly visible to the men below, and began tending to Tommy's breathing treatments as if nothing unusual was happening. "Sheriff Morrison," she called out in her strongest voice. "I hope you're prepared to explain to Judge Matthews why you're threatening a licensed physician in the performance of her duties." The men below shifted uncertainly. Threatening bounty hunters was one thing, but interfering with medical care was another matter entirely. "That boy has pneumonia," Catherine continued, her voice carrying across the silent street. "Moving him now could kill him. Are you prepared to face murder charges?" Jake watched in amazement as Catherine turned their desperate situation into a legal standoff. She was buying them time, using her authority and the law to create doubt among their attackers. "Medical emergencies supersede bounty claims," she declared. "Any attempt to remove these children before my patient is stable will be reported to the territorial authorities." Dutch Miller's voice carried a note of uncertainty now. "Doc, we just want the kids. No need for trouble." "Then you'll wait until my patient is stable," Catherine replied firmly, "however long that takes." From the street came the sound of heated argument among the bounty hunters. They'd come prepared for violence, not a legal battle with a physician who knew exactly which laws were on her side. "She's bluffing," Jake heard one man mutter. "Maybe," Dutch replied. "But are you willing to bet your neck on it?" As the sun climbed higher and the standoff continued, Jake realized that Catherine had done more than buy them time. She'd shown him what it meant to fight smart instead of just fighting hard. By midday, the tide had turned in ways none of them could have predicted, all because word of the standoff had spread through Willow Creek like wildfire. Jake watched from the clinic window as townspeople began gathering in the street, their faces grim with purpose. Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house arrived with a pot of coffee for the medical emergency. Tom Bradley, the blacksmith, positioned himself near the bounty hunters with his hammer prominently displayed. "What's happening?" Lily whispered, peering around Jake's shoulder. "People are choosing sides," Catherine observed with satisfaction, "and it seems they've chosen ours." The crowd's presence changed everything. What had been a simple bounty collection was now a public confrontation, with witnesses and potential jury members watching every move. Dutch Miller stepped forward, his frustration evident. "Folks, this is legal business. Those children are wanted by the authorities." "Whose authorities?" Mrs. Henderson called out. "Because last I checked, Sheriff Morrison works for us, not some orphanage 2 counties over." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Jake realized that Catherine's stand had given the townspeople something they'd been wanting for years, a chance to push back against Morrison's corruption. "The boy needs medicine and rest," Dr. Catherine announced to the crowd. "These men want to drag him away from treatment for money. Is that the kind of town we want to be?" "No," came the unified response, growing stronger as more people arrived. Jake felt something shifting inside his chest, a warmth he hadn't experienced in years. These people, strangers really, were risking their own safety to protect his family. It was the kind of community he'd forgotten could exist. "Tommy," he said quietly, kneeling beside the boy, "how are you feeling?" "Better," Tommy answered honestly. "But Uncle Jake, are we going to be safe?" Before Jake could answer, a new voice cut through the tension from the edge of the crowd. "What in hell is going on here?" Judge Matthews had arrived, his black robes and stern expression causing immediate silence among the bounty hunters. At 70 years old, he commanded respect from every corner of the territory. "Your Honor," Catherine stepped forward smoothly, "I'm treating a child with pneumonia. These men want to remove him from medical care for financial gain." The judge's sharp eyes took in the scene, the armed bounty hunters, the protective townspeople, the 2 children visible in the clinic window. "Dutch Miller," he said finally. "Still taking money for dirty work, I see." Dutch's face darkened. "This is legal, Judge. We got papers." "Show me these papers." As Dutch fumbled for the documents, Jake caught Catherine's eye. She gave him the slightest nod, and he understood. This was their moment, not to run or fight, but to trust in the law and the community that had surrounded them. "While you're looking for those papers," Judge Matthews continued dryly, "perhaps someone can explain why armed men are threatening a physician in the performance of her duties." The bounty hunter's certainty was crumbling, and everyone could see it. Victory was within reach, but Jake knew the real fight was just beginning. Judge Matthews examined the bounty papers with the thoroughness of a man who'd spent 40 years distinguishing between justice and legal manipulation, his weathered face growing sterner with each line he read. "These documents," he said finally, "claim these children are wards of the state. But I see no death certificates for their parents, no proper abandonment proceedings, no investigation into available family members." Dutch Miller shifted uncomfortably. "The orphanage said everything was legal." "The orphanage said," Judge Matthews repeated with dangerous calm. "Mr. Miller, in my courtroom, we deal in facts, not institutional claims." Jake stepped forward, Tommy and Lily flanking him like small soldiers. "Your Honor, these children are my brother's kids, my blood. I have letters that prove it." He pulled out the worn envelope he'd carried for 5 years, the last communication from Michael. Inside were family photos, birth certificates, and a letter mentioning Jake in Wyoming as next of kin. Catherine moved beside him, her presence steady and supportive. "Your Honor, I can provide medical documentation that these children were suffering from exposure and malnutrition when Mr. Thornton found them. They were clearly abandoned, not voluntarily surrendered." The judge studied the documents carefully, then looked at Tommy and Lily with kind eyes. "Children, do you want to stay with your uncle?" "Yes, sir," Tommy said immediately. "He's our family." "He saved us from freezing," Lily added. "And Dr. Catherine is teaching me about bones." A slight smile cracked the judge's stern expression. "I see. Dr. Walsh, what is your assessment of these children's current care?" "They're thriving, Your Honor. Clean, fed, loved, and receiving proper medical attention. Mr. Thornton has provided everything they need." Judge Matthews turned back to Dutch Miller with eyes like winter steel. "Mr. Miller, your documents are insufficient and possibly fraudulent. These children have family who can care for them, and they've expressed their clear preference." "But the reward," Dutch began. "There is no reward for kidnapping children from their legal guardian," the judge interrupted, "which is what this would constitute." The crowd murmured approval as the bounty hunters began backing away, their easy payday turning into potential legal trouble. "Sheriff Morrison," Judge Matthews called out sharply, "a word." As Morrison approached reluctantly, Jake felt Catherine's hand slip into his. The gesture was subtle but unmistakable, a promise of partnership that went beyond this moment. "Your Honor," Catherine said quietly, "there's one more matter. These children need formal guardianship papers to prevent future incidents." "Indeed." The judge's eyes twinkled. "Dr. Walsh, given your involvement in this case, would you be willing to serve as co-guardian? These children clearly need both masculine and feminine influences." Jake's heart stopped. He looked at Catherine, seeing surprise and something deeper in her green eyes. Yes," she said softly. "I'd be honored." Tommy and Lily exchanged glances, then broke into grins that could have lit the entire territory. "Does this mean Dr. Catherine is going to be our aunt?" Lily asked with the directness of childhood. Judge Matthews chuckled. "We'll sort out the details, but for now these children are exactly where they belong." As the crowd dispersed and the bounty hunters slunk away in defeat, Jake found himself standing in the middle of Willow Creek's main street with an instant family and a future he'd never dared imagine. The twins were safe, the law was on their side, and Catherine Walsh was looking at him like he might be worth the risk of loving. It was enough to make a man believe in second chances. 3 months later, the mountain cabin that had sheltered one lonely man now rang with the sounds of a family learning how to be together, and Jake Thornton discovered that happiness was far more complicated than he'd ever imagined. "Uncle Jake," Lily's voice carried from the barn where she was supposed to be gathering eggs. "Tommy's stuck again." Jake looked up from the leather harness he was mending to find his nephew dangling upside down from the barn's hayloft, grinning sheepishly. In the 3 months since the standoff in Willow Creek, the twins had transformed from frightened refugees into confident, curious children who seemed determined to explore every inch of their new world. "How exactly did you get stuck this time?" Jake asked, trying to look stern while fighting back laughter. "I was showing Lily how to swing from the rope like Papa taught me," Tommy explained, "but my foot got tangled." As Jake worked to free his nephew, he marveled at how much had changed. The cabin he'd shared with ghosts was now filled with laughter, arguments, questions, and the constant chaos of 2 bright children who'd never learned to be quiet. Catherine visited twice a week, officially to monitor Tommy's recovery from pneumonia, but actually to help with the countless challenges of suddenly becoming a family. She'd proven herself invaluable at everything from treating scraped knees to teaching basic lessons, to helping Jake navigate the mysteries of raising a daughter. "Dr. Catherine's coming today," Lily announced, appearing with a basket of eggs and hay in her hair. "I'm going to show her the book I've been reading about bones." Jake's pulse quickened at the mention of Catherine's name, just as it had for weeks. What had started as gratitude for her help had deepened into something more complex and frightening. She'd become essential to their lives, and Jake found himself imagining futures that included her permanent presence. But he'd learned not to take happiness for granted. The sound of hoofbeats announced Catherine's arrival, and Jake watched from the barn as she approached the cabin with her usual grace and competence. Today she was carrying more than just her medical bag, a large bundle that suggested she had plans beyond a simple checkup. "Uncle Jake!" Tommy called out, having finally been freed from his predicament. "Look what Dr. Catherine brought." Jake followed the twins into the cabin to find Catherine unpacking what appeared to be a small library's worth of books. Primers, readers, arithmetic texts, and science books that would challenge even advanced students. "I thought it was time we started formal lessons," she explained, her cheeks slightly pink. "These children are too bright to run wild without proper education. I want to learn about bones and blood and fixing people," Lily declared immediately. "And I want to learn about building things and making machines work," Tommy added. Catherine smiled at their enthusiasm. "We'll cover all of that and more. But first, we need to master reading and writing and arithmetic." As she began organizing the books, Jake found himself studying her face, noting the way she looked at his cabin as if she belonged there, the way she moved around his kitchen like she'd been doing it for years, the way the twins gravitated toward her with complete trust and affection. "Catherine," he began, then stopped, unsure how to voice the question that had been building for weeks. She looked up, green eyes questioning. "Yes?" Before Jake could find his courage, Lily solved the problem with the devastating honesty of childhood. "Dr. Catherine, are you going to marry Uncle Jake and be our aunt for real?" The silence that followed could have been cut with a knife, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of 2 people finally confronting a truth they'd been dancing around for months. 6 months after 2 freezing children had changed his life forever, Jake Thornton stood on his front porch watching his family prepare for their first Christmas together, and realized that some kinds of wealth couldn't be measured in gold or cattle. "The star goes on top," Lily declared from her perch on Tommy's shoulders as they decorated the small pine tree Jake had cut that morning. Dr. Catherine Walsh, soon to be Catherine Thornton, stood nearby with steadying hands and an expression of pure joy. The proposal had happened on a snowy afternoon in November, with both twins serving as enthusiastic conspirators. Catherine's yes had been accompanied by tears and laughter, and the kind of kiss that made Jake believe in forever. "Careful up there," Catherine warned as Tommy wobbled slightly. "We don't need any broken bones before the wedding." The wedding was planned for spring, when the mountain passes would be clear enough for guests to travel from Willow Creek. Judge Matthews had already agreed to perform the ceremony, and Mrs. Henderson was organizing what promised to be the social event of the territorial year. Tommy had grown 3 inches and lost most of his shyness, though he still had nightmares occasionally about wolves and cold. Lily had appointed herself Catherine's medical assistant and could already recite the names of every bone in the human body. Both children called Catherine Aunt Catherine now, the title settling as naturally as snow on mountain peaks. "Uncle Jake," Tommy said, climbing down from his sister's shoulders, "do you think Mama and Papa would be happy about us living here?" The question still caught Jake unprepared sometimes. The weight of responsibility and love intertwined in ways that made his chest tight. He knelt to Tommy's level, meeting those amber eyes that were so much like Michael's. "I think," Jake said carefully, "your parents sent you to me because they knew I needed you as much as you needed me. And I think they'd be proud of the family we've built together." Catherine moved to stand beside him, her hand finding his shoulder in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. They'd see 2 children who are loved, safe, and growing into remarkable people. What more could any parent want? As if summoned by their words, a winter wind swept down from the peaks, carrying with it the scent of snow and pine and possibility. But inside the cabin, warmth reigned supreme. The warmth of a fire built with careful hands, a table set for 4, and hearts that had learned to hope again. "Story time," Lily announced, settling into her favorite spot by the fire with a book about pioneering doctors. Tommy curled up beside her with his own book about engineering marvels, while Catherine and Jake took their places in the chairs they'd pulled close together over the months. This had become their evening ritual, family time that felt both completely natural and utterly miraculous. As Catherine read aloud about a female doctor who'd overcome impossible odds to practice medicine on the frontier, Jake found himself thinking about the paths that had led them all to this moment. His own years of isolation and grief, the twins' terrible journey through loss and abandonment. Catherine struggled to establish herself as a physician in a world that questioned women's capabilities. All of it had been necessary, he realized. Every hardship, every moment of despair, every choice that had seemed like an ending. It had all been leading them here, to this cabin where 4 people who'd thought themselves broken had somehow created something whole. "What are you thinking about?" Catherine asked softly during a pause in her reading. Jake looked around at his family, Tommy fighting sleep but determined to hear the end of the story, Lily hanging on every word about the brave lady doctor, Catherine watching him with eyes full of love and understanding. "I'm thinking," he said, "about how sometimes what looks like the end is really just the beginning in disguise." Outside, snow began to fall again, but inside, the Thornton family was exactly where they belonged. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. It always did in the Wyoming territory, but they'd face them together, as families do, and that made all the difference. The cowboy who'd sworn never to love again had become a father. The orphaned twins had found their home. The pioneering doctor had discovered a place where her skills and heart were equally valued. In the end, that's what the best families are. Not perfect people living perfect lives, but imperfect people choosing to love each other through whatever comes next. And in a cabin high in the Wyoming mountains, as Christmas approached and snow fell soft and steady, love had indeed conquered all. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the Wild West. where two frozen children and one lonely cowboy discovered that families aren't just born. They're built with courage, patience, and hearts brave enough to love again. I hope Jake, Tommy, Lily, and Catherine's story warmed your heart as much as it warmed mine while telling it. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to hear from listeners around the world in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more tales of love, courage, and second chances from the American frontier.